everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I am still your host, Olivia Fierro, here in 2022, and I'm so excited because today we are talking thrillers, which if you have been following the podcast and following my posts about books, you know it is pretty much my favorite genre, especially when they have juicy characters with a lot of emotional drama behind them, so some suspicious friendships and relationships. And the book we're talking about today has all of that. So stay tuned, because after my author interview, we will have a moment with Margaret. We'll be looking back at some of her favorite thrillers of last year and also what she's so looking forward to reading in this coming year. But now, joining me all the way from the United Kingdom, one day ahead. So she is a debut novelist, a fabulous journalist, and in my mind, a time traveler. Katherine Faulkner, the author of Greenwich Park. Congratulations on this fantastic book. And thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I got to tell you, the way that I have approached booking authors for this podcast has been, a lot of looking at what's coming out and then scheduling and assigning myself the reading material and then doing the interview, like you would as a reporter when you're getting ready for a story or a segment, which is what I do in my daily life. However, this had popped up on my NetGalley quite some time ago. And I said, I want to read this book. And I had flagged it and I hadn't really heard anything about it at the time when I started listening to the audio and flitting back and forth. Thank you, NetGalley. God bless you. To be able to read it on my Kindle and also listen to the audio. And I just absolutely loved it. And I thought, I've got to talk to this woman. So, this is your first novel. Tell me a little bit first about your background, and then I want you to describe this story to our listeners, because if anybody enjoys this genre at all, they absolutely should not miss Greenwich Park.
Sure. Well, I always wanted to write a novel. I was one of those kids that was always writing books and like making little books, stapling them together out of my dad's paper from his office. And so it's something I always I knew I wanted to write. But I trained as a journalist like you. And so that's my background. And I've worked as a news reporter, and I've done investigative journalism. I've done undercover reporting. I've done quite a lot of different things like that, and latterly been an editor. So I'm now an editor at the Sunday Times based in London. When I was on maternity leave, I had this idea with my first daughter. I'd had this idea for this story, and the idea had come from actually kind of a weird girl at work who I'd met. And I had this idea running around in my head, which was, what if you made friends with somebody and then you couldn't how do you unmake a friendship? When you kind of first meet somebody and you're really open with them and you're kind of saying, yeah, sure, we'll meet for coffee, we'll go for lunch. And then you figure out, actually, I'm not sure about being close to that person. And actually something's telling you that you want to pull away from that person. How do you do it? And sometimes, is it possible that you could leave it too late? So I kind of had that idea. But then when I was pregnant and I went to my first prenatal class, we call them different things. And I was in that room with all these other expectant parents, my belly out here and feeling so tired, and suddenly was being told that I had to share all these intimate details about what I thought about birth and having a baby with all these strangers. And actually, we were all needed to exchange numbers, and we were all going to be best friends, and we were all going to go through it together. I thought, this is the weirdest situation I've ever been in. And actually, I suddenly had this kind of light bulb moment. This is perfect. This is the setting for my story. This is when it's going to happen, that you're going to meet somebody. You think it's all fine at first, and then this relationship is going to go really toxic. And I had so much fun writing it. So I wrote this story, when I was on maternity leave with my daughter. I was kind of running around the park trying to get her to sleep in the pram. And then I was like, as soon as she was asleep, whipping up my laptop to get writing. Anyway, so you told me to tell you about the book. So the story, essentially, this is the story of a very anxious, kind of lonely, pregnant woman called Helen, who seems outwardly to have a perfect life. She has a beautiful house in this gorgeous neighborhood. She has a wonderful husband. She has everything you could ever want. But inside, there is a loneliness and an isolation about her, and she's quite anxious coming up to the birth of her baby because she's had previous losses. And then into her life, in her first prenatal class, she meets this unpredictable single mother called Rachel, who is keen to be her friend and who automatically kind of starts to make a beeline for Helen and wants to know everything about her life and wants to be friends and wants to meet up with her at a time when she's quite isolated. And essentially, Greenwich Park tells the story of how Helen's outwardly perfect life starts to unravel as a result of this very toxic friendship that she develops with Rachel. And as time goes on, she finds herself unsettled by Rachel's behavior, but she doesn't know how to pull away from her. And at the same time, it becomes very clear that Rachel actually has an ulterior motive for wanting to be part of Helen's life. And in fact, she is connected to a secret from Helen's past, which threatens to destroy her life.
So many layers to this story, and it's just I mean, the word that I used to describe a book that plays out like this is just delicious. Like you want to come back for more. I can't wait for what's next, and kind of, you're fantasizing about thinking that you're figuring out what's up and who's motivated by what, and who's telling the truth and who isn't. And the story, the characters in particular, are so well developed. So I gotta, in these interactions with Helen and Rachel initially, I kept thinking about something that my mom used to always say to me as a kid, which was, choose your friends, don't let your friends choose you. And I've said this to my son already, and I feel like the oldest lady in the world, because when you ever start like regurgitating what you heard as a little kid, and you would respond with an eye roll, and then you're saying it, but I was thinking, this is this perfect example. I mean, we have to be in charge of our own destiny when it comes to relationships, because it is certainly in good fiction, people are not always what they're presenting, and you don't always understand what the motivations are. Talk to me specifically about Helen, and just you just built up such a unique, complicated woman with so many quirky, odd attributes of her own. And so she's a really great person to be following, because I think there was something that she says right away at the beginning that I just scribbled down because it was such an effective sentence. She said, when she's at that class, she says, asks herself in her mind, how do people make friends? What would Serena do? Serena being the sister-in-law, who she certainly looks up to as a much more a smooth, beautiful, social creature. But to me, that said so much about this woman's depth of insecurities and kind of sense of loneliness too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Helen was so much fun to write. So in my head, she's this incredibly she's not an unreliable narrator, but she's a narrator who actually questions her own reliability. So that's why she was so much fun, I think. And I think she is not an assertive person, and your whole thing, you're so right about choosing your friends. She doesn't know how to do that. She's just so grateful someone's chosen her that she forgets that she needs to be in charge of the relationships in her life. Poor Helen, she lacks confidence, she lacks assertiveness. And I think a lot of us do feel anxious in these social situations. She is, I think that's something that's universal. But for Helen, she just finds these kinds of situations really hard. She's out of her comfort zone. She doesn't quite know how to make the first move in relationships. And I think it's so funny because we talk so much about romantic relationships and how hard it is to manage them and what you should or shouldn't do. Should you call? Should you make the first move? All of this kind of thing. We don't talk about that with female friendships, which are often actually much trickier and more complicated and more multi-layered. And Helen finds them hard. And she particularly looks at Serena, as you mentioned, her sister-in-law, and she thinks, how does Serena do this? She kind of effortlessly goes through her life, accumulating friendships from her work, from her school time. And people just gravitate to her, and Helen's never had that experience. And I think in this day and age, we're all quite guilty of looking at other people's lives and also thinking that they're perfect, and Helen's terrible for that. And I don't think it helps that Serena's obsessed with Instagram and she's always kind of posting pictures about her life. She looks at this woman and she just thinks, I don't understand why I can't have that. And I should be able to go to a prenatal class and make one friend. And so when exactly a normal friend. So, but when Helen, so then when in that context is when And plus all the strangeness of late pregnancy, when you're in this really strange phase where you're not exactly, you know, your life's about to change, you're not exactly sure how or what that's going to look like, how it's going to affect your existing friendships. Suddenly I think that late pregnancy can cause all kinds of strange tensions with other women as well, because suddenly, whether you like it or not, you're a symbol of something that maybe they can't have, or they don't want to have that yet. They don't necessarily want you to be there yet because they're not yet there yet. And all of that complexity is bound up in late pregnancy. And so into all of that comes Rachel, who just wants to be Helen's friend and wants to hang out with her and wants to talk to her about being pregnant, and they're in the same area and their babies are due at the same time. And so for Helen, it's quite difficult to resist the pull of that kind of easy, oh, well, it's done. I've made a friend and she actually wants to hang with me. And even though she instinctively feels there's just something a bit off about this person, by the time that she kind of develops a bit more confidence in those feelings, she's kind of in too deep.
She getting inside her brain, and from her perspective, it's tangibly like it's uncomfortable. And probably that is because, if we're honest, we're all going to see little, even confident people have spheres or times in their lives or old friendships where they were the one that lacked confidence, or they're the ones that are looking at the other people and trying to read their cues and follow along. So there's something but grossly uncomfortable and almost borders into creepy when you're really in Helen's thoughts and you're realizing how much she fixates on trying to follow the cues of somebody else, down to, a piece of jewelry, or an item of home furnishing that you want to pick up, and you just think, okay, I don't trust myself enough. If they give it the okay, then I know that this is something of value or something that will improve me in some way or make me more like what I want to be like. So from your writing perspective, you were able to write from Helen and also from Serena, which couldn't be two more opposite voices, and that must have been really fun.
It was, and actually, it was really enjoyable to write. I find it really enjoyable to write from different perspectives. I kind of naturally write in the first person. But yes, it was really enjoyable to actually have a break from Helen sometimes. She's kind of exhausting. A lot of people are just like, when they read this book, they're just like, why doesn't she just stand up for herself? She is, but she just lacks that confidence. I kind of found it interesting to write about somebody like that, because I don't actually think that you get those characters so much in fiction. I feel like everyone, the heroine always has to be this ballsy go-getter of a woman. And it's like, I don't know, that's like the thing that we're all supposed to be now, is like we have to be these super confident, super socially dexterous people, but in real life, a lot of people do find social interaction much harder. And so Helen, yeah, she has a good heart, but she doesn't quite know how to she doesn't quite know how to manage her own life. And actually, another aspect of her personality is that she's so privileged that she doesn't really, her privilege actually blinds her from understanding what is really going on in her own life, and actually some of the sinister things that are going on amongst with the people closest to her. So her kind of blindness was quite fun. Whereas Serena is obviously a much cooler character, much more I guess she's more manipulative. She's very smart. She knows exactly what she's doing, what she wants to get out of situations. And so the key with her was trying to get inside the head of this kind of glacial person, which was in some ways harder.
So there's a dynamic of the four people, the two wives and the husbands, but that's brother and a sister, so in-laws and friends with their own friendship history from college, from Cambridge. So I know that you also are a Cambridge graduate, right? So I want to, coming here from the States, of course, this is it's like a Harvard, like we've all, of course, heard of it and know what's wrapped up in it, that definitely the accomplishment that goes with just invoking the name of it. But that was it's a big part of Helen's identity, and they sort of kind of mock her a little bit for needing to sort of mention it all the time, like she's the one living in the past and everybody's kind of moved on. And I imagine that's a big part of the crafting of her character too. She's sort of stuck in a dynamic that started, around the age of 20, and of course longer, of course, her lifetime with her brother. But you sort of have a harder time maybe reinventing yourself when you're still being framed by the people who have known you through so many stages of your life. So for the listeners and readers who are American, right, give me some descriptions of like all of the stuff that, is inferred when you're talking about Greenwich Park in particular, and also Cambridge.
For sure. Well, they're two very, very kind of iconic, historic British places, I suppose. But Cambridge University is it's very traditional, very beautiful, hasn't changed much in kind of 800 years. Exactly how you imagine the kind of the beautiful spires and the courtyards and these kind of quiet lawned colleges and halls where people study, and we all wore gowns to dinner. I mean, it's still super traditional in that way. We said grace in Latin, could probably still reel it off for you. It's like it's a very unique experience, and because of the college system, which is not common to all universities in Britain, but in Oxford and Cambridge, you don't just study at a university, you study in a college, which is a very close-knit group of people, and you live in these kind of old-fashioned rooms in the actual old college buildings, and you get to know each other very well, and very strong friendships do tend to be formed. But there's also this there is something about people who can't move past that stage of their lives. And I think for Helen, you're exactly right. The other characters have kind of, that was their past, but they've moved on. But for Helen, this was this wonderful part of her life that it was kind of her golden age, really. And since then, her parents have both died, and she's failed to get pregnant successfully, and she has got pregnant, but she has lost babies, and so I think that's partly why she harks back to that happy period of her life. And it's kind of tiresome for the people around her who actually they've moved on, got their own lives, and she wants to hark back to the closeness that she felt in her relationship then, and also her friendship with Serena. And so it's a kind of I think it's a part of illustrating the sort of sadness at the heart of Helen. But it's also kind of playing slightly to a British stereotype that we say in Britain that, the AstraZeneca vaccine, how do you know whether you've got the Oxford vaccine? Because it'll tell you that's where it's from. I mean, people who went to Oxford or Cambridge tend to talk about it a lot, and it's a bit of a joke. So Helen's kind of one of those people. In terms of Greenwich, I mean, Greenwich is a really interesting part of London. It feels kind of off on its own. It's obviously the name of where Greenwich Mean Time comes from. It's where you have the Meantime clock and the Royal Naval Colleges, and it has this incredible maritime history. Greenwich Park is a beautiful royal park, from which was kind of made famous in the time of Henry VIII. And so there's this rich history and these incredible buildings, and it's all very sort of gorgeous, but at the same time there is this darker side to Greenwich. It's around the areas around it in London are not particularly affluent. There's the river, and there's these kind of pubs down by the river. There is a kind of seedier, not so nice side to it. There's also this kind of dodgy tunnel that goes under the Thames and joins Greenwich to the rest of London, which is really very creepy. This kind of leaky foot tunnel. So there were there's lots of kind of hidden corners and darker places in Greenwich that kind of, there's a kind of layer that exists under the beauty of the perfection of the outside and the tourist side of it. So I guess that's why it felt like a fitting setting for my novel, which is all about kind of peeling away the perfection of this seemingly perfect life and revealing what's really underneath.
That is so cool to hear you explain it that way. And now it's been so many years since I've gone to London. Now I will want next time have all of this like in mind, because
you'll have to do the
way you look at everything. One of the things too, I mean, there are a lot of themes that you touch on in this book, which just gives it, a lot of ways to kind of hook you emotionally, along with kind of going along with what the heck, mystery thriller aspect that's happening here with this story. But the touching on the motherhood and as you mentioned, kind of that vulnerable and important and emotional space of going from from woman who wants to be a mother to becoming a mother, looking, for Helen, it's looking back at mourning the loss of her mother and kind of figuring out life without her there, and living in her shadow as well, and kind of needing her in this time when you would need her so much. And then also the fear that, you, as much as there are elements that drive you crazy about Helen, your heart is so with her, because anybody who has suffered miscarriage, and the way that Helen has miscarriage after miscarriage and just horrific disappointment, that's a gut-wrenching experience. And so if anybody has a free pass to be a little loony or a little off, it's a woman who's gone through that.
For sure. And for Helen, I think that going through that and the kind of stereotypes around the kind of loony pregnant woman are partly why she doesn't trust herself and trust her own instincts enough to kind of back herself enough to actually act on them and back away from this person. And I think we carry a lot of that with us, don't we, when we're pregnant, when we have this idea about ourselves and about pregnant women that perhaps they are hormonal, they misjudge things, they go a bit crazy. And it was really important to me when I wrote this book that actually that's not what's happening here, that Helen doesn't trust herself, but she should, actually. And she's not going crazy. It's just that something very sinister is really happening to her. But I think what was quite fun to play with was the idea that she doubts herself because of all of that baggage we carry. For sure, it's such a vulnerable time. And I do think your brain slightly, as much as I do get frustrated with the stereotype of the crazy pregnant woman, I think your brain does slightly change. Mine did. I felt myself kind of feeling a bit fuzzier in those late months of pregnancy and feeling a bit less, I wasn't very good at my job in the way that I usually was. And I was kind of thinking about other things, and I was in a bit of a dream world. And I do think it's a particular time and a particular mental space. And I found it interesting that happened to my brain. And I kind of, I guess, wanted to explore it in the novel.
You create a lot of great characters here. And we talked about the ones that we focus on the most through the story, which would be Helen, certainly, and Serena, but also Rachel. Rachel is the one that we're looking at, wondering what is it that she's after? Who is she? What are her motivations? As she is also, and also your timeline narrative. So for readers, if you're going to pick up this book, it is so clever the way that you move us along in the story by weeks of the pregnancies. And here are two women who are having, pregnancies around the same time period, and they're moving forward with this journey. And it's so that I thought that was a great narrative tool. But the way you describe Rachel it kept standing out to me with her pointy teeth and her extremely thin body. And there are certain very visceral, very, exacting descriptions of her that you really, create a person who, I could see her, and I felt like I could touch her.
Yeah. Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, she obviously she's the antagonist, and so any scene with her was great fun to put together. And I think the reason that she's so much fun is that she is very, very disruptive. She's the polar opposite to Helen in terms of there are similarities between them. They're both kind of nosy Parkers. They both like poking around. But at the same time, where Helen is intensely aware and cares about what people think of how she's acting and is constantly second guessing her own movements and her own actions and her own interactions, Rachel doesn't care what anyone thinks of her. And that makes her very powerful and makes her very threatening. So what's interesting, I think, about Rachel is that she's very threatening to this group of people even before she's even done anything, even when she's hardly got started. So this is this group of very insular, privileged people. And so Rachel is a huge threat to them, even when she's just turning up to a dinner party, dressed in slightly the wrong things, saying slightly the wrong things, kind of bringing things up that people really wouldn't rather talk about, actually, if you don't mind. And, so that is choreographing that was very fun. And I think that she's just a huge disruptor. And so when she is in a scene with these other people, she really holds up a mirror to their extreme privilege and also to some of the hypocrisy that exists in Helen's life. So Yeah, I enjoyed writing her a lot.
Yeah, she creates a lot of cringe moments and you're just, oh my gosh, you don't know what's going to happen next. And so you get that little tension in your shoulders. And that's on top of what's really happening in the plot. So just in so many ways, I just absolutely loved this book. I completely recommended it. It gives you so much. Let me just ask you as we wrap up two things. Your work as a journalist, and I've had the privilege of talking to so many novelists who started writing news. And so it is many times they say, they were ready to just kind of shake off, like dealing with the negativity that you have to, deal with reporting news stories. But obviously, it lends itself to a skill set that is set for fantastic storytelling in the world of fiction. So, what elements of that career do you bring into this career, and how will that all continue to move forward for you? And also, I mean, I guess have you started another book already, or where do we go from here?
Yes, these are all good questions, not all of which I've completely worked out yet, but I I love being a journalist and it gives me endless ideas. And working as a reporter, especially when in my earlier years as a reporter, you just see the full gamut of humanity. You knock on doors, you go to court cases, you see inside people's lives at the most dramatic and extraordinary moments of time. And you also get up and close to politics, and it's in an extraordinarily inspiring creatively if you're that way inclined, because these stories just set off triggers in your head for more stories. And also, I think actually the process of writing is less frightening probably if you do it all the time. So I think in those two ways, it was very helpful for me. And also I'm very used to editing and being edited. I'm not precious about my work, and in the way that, I mean, I am, but I'm not in the way that I'm not like horrified if somebody says, actually just get rid of those 5 chapters, I'm like, okay. Um, Whereas I think for some writers, it's like, and a huge trauma. But I think that for me, one of the main, obviously, things in Greenwich Park, which came from my journalistic work, was Katie, because she is obviously the journalist and she is the person who's determined to find out what's really going on here. And certainly her storyline and her the court case she's covering, that's all of that is quite closely inspired by my own work. In terms of what's happening going forward, it's really interesting because I actually took a break for a while from doing journalism at the beginning of last year, about 6 months, to just work at home and just work on my second novel, which I am well sort of established with, thank goodness now. But actually I didn't find it great creatively to be kind of in my house all the time. I mean, it didn't help that we were in a national lockdown, so I think it probably wasn't a fair test, but actually I get so many ideas from just being out in the world. And actually, so I decided to go back to work part-time, which is what I'm doing now. I'm working as the head of news projects at the Sunday Times, so I just look after the big investigations that the newspaper does and edit those. And I'm finding it really helpful to actually have some time where I'm not just focused on the books, where I'm doing something else. I think the two things are mutually supportive. The problem is that obviously I have no time, and I also have 2 children under 5. So that's the main problem that I'm having at the moment, is how to reconcile those 3 very important strands of my life. But it'll figure itself out at some stage, we hope.
And 2 little kids, is that right?
That's right. I have 2 girls. One is 4 and one is just about to be 2.
Oh yeah, I mean, they're not time consuming at all.
No,
No,
easy.
so much free time. Yeah. Well, I mean, continue doing exactly what you're doing, because I mean, it was just it all fell into the right spot there with Greenwich Park, and it was just a fantastic book, and fabulous on audio also. So for our listeners, however you enjoy a thriller, this is the one for you. And Katherine, it was delightful to speak to you. Thank you so much for letting me interrupt evening bath time so that I could chat with you at noon the day before. I really appreciate it. Greenwich Park releasing this week. When you're listening to this podcast, go and get it right away. You'll not regret it. Katherine, thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's time now for a moment with Margaret, and I'm glad we say moment in particular, Margaret, because I was just having a good laugh with Katherine Faulkner, the author of Greenwich Park. We just finished up a lovely conversation. She's super cool. But then we ended the interview and she goes, I think I messed you up and misled you about the time zone. So I was thinking she was already one day ahead, but in London, they're just 7 hours ahead. And I happened to be talking to her at our lunchtime, which was nighttime for her. And, we've done the talks in the evening with Brits who are in the morning over there, or if you're talking to somebody in Australia from here in the afternoon, you're the next day. So blah, blah. But I told you, time zones and just my brain, they can't do it.
It's funny because when you just said 7 hours, I went, no, it's 8 hours, but I forgot time zones again because you're in Arizona and I'm in California right now. So I'm apparently also having that problem. Because I went, wait,
So
it's 8 hours, but it's not.
heck, and yeah, she was also afterwards. I told her, and we're in a state that doesn't change, daylight or what. She was like, the only one. I said, so just trust. Like it's very confusing. And she said she once missed a podcast that was in Hong Kong because she had actually the entire wrong day based upon the time zones. So, anyways, it happens to even brilliant Cambridge graduates like her. So I know that you have not yet finished this book. I really loved it. You're in the middle of it, right?
Yes, I'm in the middle of it. I am listening to the audiobook, so a lot of really great accents. We love an accent. I did slow it down a little bit because I need that for the accents, but it reminds me a little bit, and I don't know how it ends, but right now it's giving some vibes of some of the, we talked about Neighbors being involved in Neighbors drama. There was a book that I recommended when we talked about that with in a previous podcast. So it reminds me a little bit of that. Also the push. It kind of feels, I mean, without it being psychological thriller at this point, that's not how it feels. That's not how it feels where it's going, but kind of that, snooping around, looking into people. Rachel, who nobody really knows anything about this person, feels very much like she walked out of the push. So that's how I was feeling about it.
Yes. So it definitely, and I think anything that involves that stage of pregnancy and people probably feel very vulnerable and they're emotional and all of that, it definitely is like a combination of themes from that with a lot of other different psychological thrillers that that we have enjoyed. And it's just I thought it was just a very entertaining read. And Rachel is a creeper straight up. But she's not the only person who's got a lot of secrets in this whole equation. And so it's really a fun book. I thought it flew by, and it's full of surprises. And there's not one dud of a character that doesn't have something interesting going on. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, and I love that. And it's popping back and forth. I'm right now at Helen's 37 weeks pregnant at this point. Mm-hmm. And so we're coming to it. I suspect. Let's see how far I am through it.
These are the kind of books that this is my go-to style of book. So if you enjoy like a Lisa Jewell or a Sally Hepworth novel, then you will enjoy this by Katherine Faulkner. And it's her first novel. So it's good to be talking about it and get her name out there.
And Sally Hepworth actually has a new book coming out later this year, right?
The Younger Wife. I actually am ready to read it. I've got a copy of it. Nice. And then I was trying to kind of save it to time it perfectly so that it wouldn't, closer to the release, but it's been calling my name. I just love her.
It's funny because I wanted that book so badly and I got denied on the galley for it. It's probably because of how many books I haven't done feedback for yet, since I get approved very quickly and very often. So I'll let that one slide, Sally, your team. But there are, I read that Simone St. James book that's coming out in March. I really loved The Sundown Motel. So that her newest book is coming out in March. But
You already read this?
I already read it.
And what
It's
was this one
funny.
called again? I saw this as well, and I've never read her, so I need to.
I am looking at, I can't remember it up. The Book of Cold Cases.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was my little type thing. I'm using my old school laptop to be a tripod.
Yes.
So I hope you all enjoyed the key typing. Yeah, that comes out March 15th. I read that one, loved it. It's not super, I mean, it's involved, but it's not, I wouldn't call it cozy crime either, but it doesn't, it's not like slasher or anything. So that's, I mean, it's true thriller. That one comes out in March. Also really excited about The Golden Couple. So that comes out in March as well.
March. Yes. March, there's a lot of good releases coming out in March. And Golden Couple, I will say, is felt in the way that the story plays out and sort of the type of characters that we're watching and getting involved in and the relationships is similar. It's almost an American version of Greenwich Park. So Greenwich Park being very British, and I enjoyed kind of asking her about some of like the Brit stuff and like what that neighborhood is like. And obviously there's a lot of things that people from the UK will pick up on that's inferred by a neighborhood and a school and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I loved The Golden Couple, and we are supposed to be able to have those two authors on the podcast for the week that book comes out as well. I love that book.
I really enjoyed it, and it very similarly, it has that same feeling of there's definitely more than meets the eye about the in-depth of all of these characters. I really liked The Golden Couple a lot.
And it also does a great job of, so that is a 2-narrator book. And obviously we'll talk about it much more at length when the authors are available, but going back and forth between the two women, and the voices are so distinctly different. I mean, you're 3 words in and you know exactly who is talking to you. I mean, it's just, it's really well done. And it's another one that also did audio where they have 2 actresses, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that one I did audio as well. And I remember listening to it while getting ready for work and going, how am I going to press pause on this for today? Because I want to just keep listening to it. And that's the tell of a really good thriller is, okay, now I really want to keep going. And then I know one of our favorites, Lucy Foley, has a new book coming out as well in February, The Paris Apartment. Did you get approved for that one?
They've got it in my neck alley.
I am in limbo. I am in book purgatory, and I don't like it. They haven't.
Well, I think that's got to be one of the most requested books. She is so good, and I was so late to the party with her because I only remember just read, what was it, The Guest List?
Yeah, I actually got The Guest List. I think, did I hand it off to you? I can't remember. I know I sent it to my friend Erin.
I know you
here
told
in
me
California.
I had to read it.
Well, I got her book as an ARC, as an advanced reader copy at American Library Association's conference when I went with my sister several years ago. And I loved the cover art. I love a thriller. It was in the adult, like, take this copy. And I said, sure, I will. And then I read it and went, okay, I like this person. I like this author.
Oh, yes.
Here we are. So I'm hoping I get out of purgatory.
I'm sure that this one won't disappoint. So yeah, there's a lot of the types of books that we love coming out in early spring, really. And then I was also looking ahead, and we get to kind of see, what's coming out later and on Neck Alley, even totally different genre, but Jennifer Weiner already is having that next book in the series this May. I mean, it's just amazing to me how the timing for these fantastic authors, that they just are able to just hit that. We expect that book to be ready for May, and look, here it is.
I mean, we've only been doing this podcast for since May, and she already has a new book out. I know. And that's
doesn't it make us feel grossly unaccomplished? Like, what have we done in the last 6 months?
Really nothing, honestly. I can't even finish a puzzle in like a month's time. So,
And now that Wordle has come into my life, I mean, I'm doing even less.
I'm having a really hard time with Wordle. I some days I do really great, and some days I have no idea what the word is. I cheated today. Don't tell April. I cheated,
Oh my
but
gosh.
hopefully. Oh, and if anybody still has a landline in their lives, like I do, the phone is ringing. I don't. My parents. I'm at my parents' house, but the phone's ringing again. They get called
Yeah.
so much.
Whoopsies. That's why
Yeah.
I don't hear it at all.
Well, good.
My thing with the Wordle is when you're done too soon and then you're like, it tells you how many hours you have to wait till the next puzzle. It's kind of
Oh my
disheartening.
gosh.
And so then I've
Yes.
gone back to, I have the New York Times on my phone. And so they have a lot of games and puzzles and they do like a mini crossword daily that you can usually finish in about 2 minutes or so. And then they have a spelling bee game, which is just, I mean, you could spend eternity. It's so impossible to get to like the high rankings because you're making as many words as you can out of this hive of letters and you can
Wow.
reuse letters. So, but you have to use that center letter. So, to get to like great status on one puzzle, you need maybe 68 words sometimes or points or whatever. It could take up all day. And so now like when I'm like, having like a Wordle, wanting to do Wordle, then I'm going to that. And it's probably all going to get in the way of my reading.
If you want Wordle, so I'm, here at my parents' house in California, and my a friend of the family was here, and I was talking to her about Wordle, and she found an app that's very much like Wordle. It's called Puzzword, Puzzz word, and it's the same thing as Wordle, but you can just keep playing it.
Oh no!
So write that down.
There goes
but
my parenting.
I've also been doing nonogram, which is like, it's kind of like Sudoku, but it's creating pictures. And I love Sudoku. That's one of my big things. And so I've been doing that. And I only started like 3 days ago. I'm on like a level 150 or something because I can't stop. Also, Merge Mansion. Hulu ads got me on Merge Mansion.
Merge Mansion.
Yes, you maybe have seen a commercial. It's very awkward. It's like a grandmother running from her granddaughter, and there's secrets of this mansion. It's a merge game. So you get items, and then you merge the items to make a bigger, better item. And you have to turn in these items to like clear out the mansion. And this big family secret. I don't know, something about merging the items is very like satisfying. I don't know what it is. There's no skill. There's nothing involved. It's just I move this little rake with this little rake, and they make shears, and now I can trim the bushes. It's very
That's very meditative. Actually, it sounds like the same premise of what everybody loves so much about when Nate plays, that both the Minecraft and the Roblox,
Yeah.
it's, now I have this. Now I've got
It's
this tool.
Minecraft
Now I've
for
done this.
adults.
Look what I made. He'll run up to me like, Mom, look what I made. Like, I can't believe it. I'm thinking he's speaking about something in the real world, and I'm like, what? If only he's got the iPad, and I'm like, and then I realized, this really matters to him, and he's like legitimately proud. So then I try to like muster it up. What? It's
like,
incredible.
yay.
Okay. And then I'm like, I
Sounds
have no idea
great.
what you're talking about. End scene.
I don't know anything about Minecraft, but if it's anything like Merge Mansion, I can understand. It's so addicting, and it's funny because a friend of mine, she also got hooked on it, but she pays for the app. I refuse. Like for extra energy, I just come back later. I go to Nonogram.
But then do you have ads
or
pop up?
Yeah, I let the ads play.
Yeah.
I don't even care.
Yeah.
I just let it well, in Merge Mansion, there aren't ads. It's just you only have a limited amount of energy to do the things you need to do. But
so really it's an
Nonogram,
analogy for life.
Oh, yes. But Nonogram, it's like an ad every 3 seconds. And if you give up your lives, if you mess up too many times, it's like, if you want to continue this level, you have to watch an ad. I'm like, okay. All right. And they all have sound, which scares the hell out of my parents. They're like, what is that?
The same I do. There's one other one I started doing on a flight. Oh, actually, when we were in Mexico, Word Crush, where you're just you're just searching for the words back and forth. And then you're
Yes.
just going and going and going and going and going. But then you'll hit a point where there's giving you so many ads and it will be something obnoxious and somebody screaming or doing something. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. But I also refuse to buy whatever they're trying to sell
Yeah.
me. So
No
you have to
thanks.
suffer.
It's funny because the ad thing, it didn't bother me so much as now it's like if you press the X in the corner to get out of it a little off center, it
Like those
pops it up
arrows.
in the what?
Oh, you if you press it wrong, it's like you're pressing the arrows and it's like you wanted it.
It's like, oh yeah, and it opens up the app store. I'm like, listen, I don't want bubble merge. I don't know what bubble merge or bubble whatever this is. I don't want it. I don't need it. Please get out of here. I don't need one more thing to add to my downloads.
We don't need one more thing. Not one
No.
more thing. But if you are obsessed with something that you think other people who enjoy reading would enjoy that we haven't stumbled across yet, email us and let us know. Because I mean, Wordle only takes up so much of the day. We might be able to add one more thing.
Yeah.
Margaret, good to see you. Before I
Good
have a
to see
coughing
you.
fit, I shall say adios.
Adios.
I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. We want to hear from you, so send us an email to oliviasbookclub@azfamily.com. Let us know what you're reading, and check out the Olivia's Book Club Facebook group, or you can follow along on Instagram at olivias.bookclub, or Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast, and please tell your friends.